Hey, everybody, this is Sean Cardinalli for the Speaking Truth to Power podcast. And I want to call this episode Politics Unusual. I think Paul would appreciate it, my guest, uh, because we could say that politics have been unusual since what? 9/11, since Obama administration, the rise of the Tea Party, since the loathsome and ineffective prosecution of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But today, with Paul Chamberlain, an amazing coach and colleague, we're focusing specifically on the disastrous. I don't even think that's needs to be qualified. The disastrous June presidential debate between President Biden and former President Trump. And as I just said, joining me today is Paul Chamberlain. I have the pleasure of introducing him. I like to call him Pablo Chamberlain de Villalobos. He's the founder of the Smart, Funny, Tortured podcast, this amazing entrepreneur and coach and marketing guru. And I like to call him a friend, even though for the audience out there, Paul, we've never met in person, but that's a tangent for another day. You said on your site, Paul, that you've learned how to find the better part of our darker angels and shine a light on the unique gifts that make us powerful. And I believe that that's what you do. I know that's what you do with your clients as well as for yourself. You help the clients reach those same kinds of realizations. So would you please give us a little better introduction of yourself, and then we'll get to the lecture at hand.
Thank you, Sean. No, this is a blast. Yeah, Sean and I have never met personally, but that's a sign of the times. I mean, how many relationships do we have now that are all virtual? That are probably a little stronger than the ones that we have, face to face with, our neighbors or even family members. So, yes, I am a coach and a coach that loves what he does. I'm also a crisis advocate, and that I love as well. That really informs me, and that goes to the darker angels, the shadows part. It's that classic Jungian kind of idea that we really can't get to know ourselves until we know our shadows. And it took me a long time to have no problem to sit down at a table with mine and look across from it and go, all right, what do you got? What's the darkest thing you can throw at me, and be able to collaborate with that, not purge it, not defile it, but actually collaborate with it. So yes. And I used to be a journalist, and I used to be, have a creative agency, and that creative agency actually dealt a lot with MSNBC. And I still have some friends over there, and people that are in the DC, Hollywood for ugly people world. And yeah, and last night was an emperor wears no clothes moment. There was nothing shocking about any of that. That former President Trump was nothing but a boorish, functionally illiterate blowhard, who lied. And I don't think I said anything, all right, functionally illiterate blowhard may have been a little editorializing, but yeah. And then an 81-year-old gentleman whose heart is in the right place, and who might not have the requisite skills to go forward.
That what's frustrating me, Paul, is everything. It's systemic frustration. But I'm debating with friends. I'm hearing from relatives. All the talking heads are talking. Politico, the worst debate performance in American history. CNN, I'm a champion debate coach. Here's how they scored. Here's what went wrong. When CNN, when their moderators actually weren't incisive at all and weren't calling anyone to account. But then at the same time, they mercifully sometimes let Joe off the hook. And we're like, okay, thanks, President, you're rambling. We're going to move to the contender. The opinion, New York Times, is it too late for the Democrats, and what should they do about it? Of course, Fox News, Trump scored some hits at the presidential debate, but Biden shocked the nation. And even for Fox, that's actually not overwrought. I have a lot of friends though who are really struggling and are really holding on to that. Yeah, but we got to stick with Joe. And my problem right now, Paul, is I do believe that. I believe that our system will not allow for anything revolutionary to happen. And I'll circle back around to that at the end of our discussion. But at the same time, I think we also have to be honest with ourselves those of us who ID as left of center, or even far left, progressive, whatever, anywhere along that range, I think we have to be honest that this really does to me feel like a crisis of leadership, and to sort of massage it or euphemize it in any sort of way is ridiculous. There was a congressman, I'll get his name in a second, but he was saying, "Don't clutch your pearls. It's only June. It's just June. We've got time." And I'm, what's that? Bakari Sellers, right? And I'm like, well, dude, like, as opposed to belittling me as the reader, like, how about try to find some vigor, some rallying point for the demos, but realistically. And I don't know. I don't really have. I guess I better get to a question, which is: do you think it is time to radicalize within the two-party system, within the Democratic Party, or do you just kind of buck up and vote for Joe? We were having issues with McCain years ago, and other elderly statesmen, and this seems kind of like that moment again, if not worse.
Well, okay. Well, here's the clickbait for the podcast. Is you said something that, I don't know whether the system will allow. The system can't tolerate it. The system is completely broken. We are completely fucked all the way around. And this goes back to Lee Atwater being George Herbert Walker Bush's campaign manager, where they decided to go after the Southern Democrats. And that's when they began to radicalize
Southern strategy.
The Southern strategy. And that began to put the rot in even on top of it. And then you take that even further back to the debate of Nixon and Kennedy, where Nixon said, "No, you're not going to put makeup on me." And then for the very first televised debate, Nixon looked like an old drunk with a 5 o'clock shadow against this stunning movie star. And he lost that, not on policy. So you take these elements that have chipped away at modern politics and turned it into the spectacle that it was last night, and plus have a Democratic Party that has no plan B, that is just full of a bunch of functionaries who answer to a star chamber of pick your name of who is in the Democratic royalty that's now making this. And we have a system that is broken. And I mean, it goes to that line of like, Democrats fall apart and Republicans fall in line. And Democrats are completely distraught right now. But it even goes to there are no parties anymore. There are factions and there are interests. There are not parties. And we're essentially having this in this country is an unofficial parliamentary system where we have all these broken parties that try to form coalitions. And we're up against a very strong coalition with a Trojan horse that's being introduced for conservative values. And, let's not even go to Project 2025, which is probably one of the most dangerous things that's come towards the country from a societal sense. So, yeah, it goes back to what I said. The system is broken. There isn't the conventional civil discourse of McCain Obama or, Kerry Bush. I mean, those days are gone.
What worries me, it's interesting that you check those, because Joy Reid and the folks on MSNBC, Maddow and all of them afterward doing the post game banter they were stunned, and they had to just come to the realization that it went terribly for Joe, and
which was kabuki theater as far as I'm concerned. With those,
really, I thought Joy Reid was pretty straight though. I mean, she would say that civilians are watching, DC folks were somewhere approaching panic, was her quote, and I thought she was honest about Joe being feeble, weak, inarticulate. He had one job, in quotes, litigate Trump's criminality and settle Democrats' sort of always scared mode, which is what you've sort of brought attention to, right? Almost always defense mode, right? The fucking Republicans play chess and demos play checkers. But the fall in line thing, it works. But how do you fall in line behind someone who threw down the gauntlet and Trump just picked it readily up, whatever you think of his policies?
I just got back from an extended trip in Europe. I was in France, and I was in Paris, and I was in Vienna. And every single question, every single eye roll was about our thank God I was there during the time that Macron called for those snap elections, and Le Pen's party made that run for the door, because that kind of took the heat off of us for ridiculous political, hijinks. But it was just shock and dismay. It was people like, how, it's a classic thing. How can you let this happen? What is wrong with the American people? I was like, I got nothing. I got nothing. I'm like, that's why I'm over here in Europe. And the most jarring thing on my whole trip was hearing an American accent. It was like, Jesus, it would just pull me back to like what I knew I was going back to.
Well, you had to fly back across to. I mean, go ahead.
So you talk about, Maddow and Joy Reid and, that whole group that gets together. Every single one of those people has an elderly relative, has seen somebody decline. And so for them to get to this point and for them to clutch their pearls and go, oh my God, how could they do this? This is elder abuse. This man, obviously had a horrible, this is tragic in that they knew that going in. They get texts from operatives, from lobbyists, from people working inside the administration. They know what's going on.
That was Joy's point, that people were actually panicking.
And so it was right there in their face. And so, but the real crime is that there is no leadership around the executive branch. The executive branch, which is kind of morphed into the head of the DNC or head of any of its party, it becomes the West Wing, which is not the way that it was designed, which was not the way that when Obama won, it was Howard who took it, who actually had the 50-state solution and the 50-state strategy and all that. That was run elsewhere outside of the West Wing.
Okay.
But now you can't tell an incumbent president, I'm sorry, sir, we don't agree. The party doesn't agree. There's no more rooms full of cigar smoking, old guys who are going to call the shots. It's just this loose confederacy of egos and interests. And that's why the system is broken.
So Michael Steele, is Michael Steele a little more on point, a little more forthright when he says own tonight, don't pretend it was something it wasn't. And if they do take that advice, probably in the time that we're talking right now, President Biden is going to come out with his response and try to assure everybody.
Well, he had that speech in North Carolina today.
I didn't hear it yet.
Yeah, I may not be good in debates. I may not move as fast as I used to. I may not, it was a complete mea culpa. It was like, yeah, it was, it was horrible, but I still know. But his thing was, I know how to tell the truth. And I was like, wait a minute. That's the pitch?
Yeah.
In the most dire time in human history, and I mean that is not hyperbole. That's the pitch, is I tell the truth?
Mm-hmm.
It's like that. Okay, that's not a master plan. It's like, I mean, I get it. If you watched last night's debate and you saw the fallout from today, sure, canned goods and ammo is probably your shopping list today.
Right. Toilet paper is gonna fly off the shelves again, like COVID 2020. But what?
God, so you're really heating me up on this one. I've never, this is
I love it. I love it.
I used to. I mean, I was asked. I was so ensconced. I'm going to say this right here. I was responsible for the rise of Chuck Todd. Ugh, man, that kills me. In 2008,
the goatee was where you guys misstepped, but that's being petty.
No, in 2008, I started a lampoon site, a satire site called Viva Chuck Todd, and it was essentially elevating him as the guy that had all the answers. And it got Willie Geist picks it up. And I'm watching Morning Joe one morning, and they feature the website. And I had, within 2 hours, I had 10,000 followers on Tumblr in 2008.
Right.
And next thing I know, I'm being covered by the LA Times. I get invited to the Democratic National Convention in Denver to be on Morning Joe. I'm in a green room with Giuliani and Romney. It just was surreal. I got to know Jonathan Capehart, who became a very good friend after that. So when you sit down and, these are people that work in a factory and know each other and know what's going on and know the script. And it's been harder and harder for me to watch. And now I don't even watch MSNBC regularly because it's the same narrative over and over and over again. I mean, during the run up to all the impeachments of Trump, I mean, it was just a constant cock tease of politics for MSNBC viewers. Like, oh, this week we got him. This
Right.
week we got him. This
Right.
week we got him. And it was like, okay, I'm out. I'm out, because it's never going to change, because then you look at the structural things that are being torn down, and it really is disheartening, which has led me to a different kind of coaching, of acknowledging amongst people that I'm talking to that there is this existential tension over everything, whether you're dealing with trauma, whether you're dealing with a divorce, whether you're dealing with addiction. Then there's something else over it. It's like, oh, I've got to get through this, and then what's the world that's greeting me on the other side? That's the new shadow that I talk about with people, and that's because I feel that.
Yeah, no, I relate to that very much, and I appreciate your articulation of it, because I mean, when I say speaking truth to power, I think there's that interpersonal, your mom, yourself, your dad, your upbringing, your childhood, the bullies, the marriages and divorces. But at some point, and a lot of the DEI folks and a lot of the BIPOC folks paying attention are understanding that we have to do some kind of work, have some kind of support network, safety net for just being here. Certainly, if you don't have money and you have another box checked, LGBTQ, BIPOC, disabled, etc. Right? To just sort of be here, and don't get me wrong, I'm speaking from a place of privilege, and I frankly, I know you're just in Europe, but I don't think I have a lot of friends left and right who are like, I'm just going to leave the country. I'm like, I kind of can't do that, because one, my ancestors built the fucking place. Two, I think the American experiment was worthy and is still worthy. We just have to stop bullshitting and stop being so ahistorical about how we got here. You were saying that I said the system was broken. You're like, no, it's shattered, and it's.
No, you said it wouldn't tolerate. I said it
wouldn't tolerate. You said it was broken. I'm sorry, but I still think there's like some potential there, and I'm never the one to be called Pollyanna, but I am wondering, like, what happens then? Like, how do we reassure the folks who are at the bottom looking up, going, this is a clusterfuck, and I'm also about to be thrown out on the street, and no one gives a shit.
That's a great segue, because I didn't want to keep going down this dark road. There is a philosophical concept called hyperobjects. And hyperobject is something so large that we can't even wrap our brain around it, such as, climate change. It's such a huge problem with so many intricate parts to it that make that up. It's overwhelming. It's like, well, Jesus, what can I do? Paper straws. Yeah, that great. You don't. But with hyper objects, the solution is actually hypo objects, which is the individual, which is literally tilling the soil that you are standing on, working within local communities, divorcing yourself from the nation state, and being like, you know what? My tribe, my people, my community, my family, I will do the best within this space that I can control. And I mean, can you imagine if everybody did that at scale? If everybody, activated themselves to have a block party, to get to know their neighbors. One of those most profound stories I ever heard was Sebastian Junger. I was at a book fair. Was in a book fair in Nantucket. Oh, how bougie and privileged is that? Jesus Christ. I hate when I drop shit and I catch myself on it. But anyways, he was there. He had just written the book Tribe. And Sebastian Junger, for people who don't know, was a war correspondent for like Vanity Fair and everybody else. He did the documentary Restrepo, where he covered the guys that lived up in the hills in the Korangal Valley in Afghanistan, and became this unit. and he began to study and report on what eventually makes us tribal. And one of the things that he covered back in the early days was the Bosnian conflict, and he went to Sarajevo. And for those of us who are old enough and then look on YouTube, you can find it. Literally, Sarajevo had the Winter Olympics before the war started. It was this fully functioning, beautiful metropolis that was reduced to, just a pockmarked, war-torn area where people would literally be sniped from the rooftops. And people, there's footage of people like literally running out to the center dividers of these highways where they were growing gardens to survive and food. And there's literally video of people running out to these gardens, getting food and running back and seeing bullets following them back into the building. And Sebastian Junger covered this. He was talking about this, and he said that he had recently gone back, and there were people that were wistful for those days because, you know what? We all knew each other. We all knew our neighbors. We were all responsible for each other's survival, and there was purpose in their lives. Now they're like, yeah, we don't know anybody. We don't know our neighbors anymore. It was this, and it was like the Blitz during London, people living in the tube. They remember those with, a certain degree of nostalgia. It's that fusing together of like, whether you've got a BIPOC neighbor, or those guys are flying the LGBTQ flag down the street, or whether that new family just moved in from Pakistan. It's like everybody get together and control your space, and then they'll just start to interlink. And I really think that that's the secret, is doing that at scale. That's how you begin to turn this.
I hear that 1,000%. My own work in the International District of Albuquerque, being there in the nonprofit world, seeing the day to day, the rent vouchers that were just randomly stopped. They just stopped getting rent vouchers to folks who obviously needed them, but this is still during COVID, when everything's terrible for everyone, much less the people already who were the working poor, the nearly homeless. I get that. I've seen it. I've done intakes for the mother with her 2 kids and the 3 dogs, and everything they own crammed into a car, trying to just find an underpass to sleep in that night, or one of the hotels that was converted during the pandemic to get a roof over their heads, right? And have some microwave macaroni and cheese just for that evening, and then see what the fuck happens. So there's this, I have this push and pull, because I get that it does come down to the individual, and it comes down to nonprofit groups like that, the social work that I'm now getting involved in which I love, because the things you're talking about, sort of a holistic, where you're talking about mind, body, spirit, economy, family, right? Financial health, and all, right? Wraparound services for people. I get that, and how you can be in the community and forge these bonds. We put on a 5K fun run in this hood, and they had never seen that before. And 300 people came out, which for Albuquerque is fucking amazing, right? Yeah. And all different shades of people, and coffee and croissants or whatever for the homeless that were coming in to the camp area, at the end of the race. And we were all just in it together, and I get it. And I love that camaraderie, and I believe in that humanness 1,000% fucking percent. How does that translate though to the systemic, the macro level idiocy and ineptitude, at the political level, at the systemic level, right? How does DC go back to the international district and be like, we can handle this? Because the demos are great at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, like every goddamn time. And how are we pivoting to someone going like, hey, go ahead and just vote for Joe, which I think you have to, which we can get to as far as voting at the end of this whole thing, quick push for voting regardless. But how does that translate? How do you tell them that these two, this octogenarian, septuagenarian, one is a demagogue and a sociopath, and the other one, it probably just needs to be an emeritus, just retire. Just thank you for your service. And thanks, Joe. We'll get someone else.
I think it's so hard to absorb for a lot of people, because we have 3 to 4 generations of comfort. We have a grouping of generations now of people who have not seen things get worse before they get better. And that is what I'm slowly starting to digest. In order for there to be change, it is not going to be orderly. That is what I believe. It is going to be a convulsive breech birth of a reawakening of the American experiment. And how that happens, I don't know. But we certainly. So let me throw this at you. What's more likely? Is some kind of explosive event that causes radical change that puts us on the right track, or we're all of a sudden overwhelmed with sensibility and pragmatism and a universal love for each other that puts us on the right track?
It's never been the latter. It's always been convulsive. But now what I fear, even going down that part of the conversation, I don't fear, but I'm wary about going into that part of the conversation, because the convulsiveness that we've seen was the insurrection, was a January insurrection. That's the right-wing version. So how do you do it where it's, peace, love, and togetherness, but it's not completely raise the structures for authoritarian reasons, but instead for democratic ones?
And in that I truly believe is the unity of people's shared experiences. It's that locality. It once again goes back to that spot, because we're all overwhelmed with, people can't handle in the life that we live right now. And this is not a judgment, but with the disparity of wealth, with the expenses going up, with everything going on, even the cliche idea of working a food kitchen on Thanksgiving is like, oh, Jesus, what else? What more do you want from me? But that taking somebody's kid to school while the parent is sick, or having a block party, or, just these tightening the fabric that made America what it is. The fact that, like I said, I went to Paris. Paris is incredibly fragmented and incredibly racially separated. It's like,
right.
Even Vienna, keep the immigrants on the fringes, and in the center, it's just us. But we don't do that. And that we have lost that ability to properly integrate others and to absorb them and to make them part of our strength. And so there, somebody who speaks on the topic of metacrisis is that we've lost the ability to look within and to find the enchantment in the universe, and to find the magic, and not go woo-woo, not go spiritual or anything like that, but just realize the inherent good. And right now we are so fixated on just this hyper object of how bad things are, when if we had somebody that was just, ask not what your country can do for you kind of moment. It's just like, what can you do for your country? We have no place to redirect those energies. There's no Peace Corps to speak of. There's no, we're not, there's no direction. There's no civic direction anymore.
This isn't post New Deal or anything like that.
There's no post New Deal. There's no post New Deal. There's no pride in the space race. There's no, there's nothing that galvanized. The only thing that's galvanized this country over the last 25 years has been tragedy. Whether it's been, Oklahoma City, 9/11, just go down the list. There has been nothing that has galvanized this country on the good side. And so it's like, okay, how about how bad things are right now galvanize us to move towards the light?
Well, my difficulty too is when I just talk about people's basic needs, or when someone a little more cynical than what you've just presented, here's what you've just presented.
Oh, I can ramp it up to 11. Let's go.
Oh, no. I find myself in an awkward position of going like, well, I'm going to be the skeptic, and I know my cynic friend Chamberlain Lois is going to go up there and just be like, just chop it all down. But you're not saying that, and I appreciate that, and I would.
I don't believe that. I mean, you and I entertain ourselves with that, and that's kind of a role I play, as Heath Ledger's Joker standing in front of a mountain of cash and burning it. Some people just want to watch the world burn. No, because the one thing in this is the commonality of suffering. is that
Mm.
everybody is, like I said, it's like birds in a tree before an earthquake. We are, there is something about humans that we have let go of our ability, our sixth sense. You know, we can walk into a room and immediately tell who the dick is. You know, we can walk into another room and know who's actually lighting it up and we want to be there. We can sense things. I mean, I've seen
Mhm.
stand-up comedians walk out on stage and completely modulate their act because of the energy coming off the stage. We have that ability. And
Mhm.
I think that we've pushed that aside. And
Is that what?
now and
Go ahead. Go ahead.
all we can feel, that machinery is still working, but all we can feel is this tension, this agita that is just in the air, and we don't know what to do with it. It's sort of, it's sort of like getting a bad diagnosis from the doctor, and the doctor going, yeah, well, I don't know, take a couple of aspirin and call me in the morning, and go, no, wait,
I'm
that's
hemorrhaging.
it. Yeah. So
I, I I'm torn. I'm torn because when we talk about a sense of radicalism or this really demagoguery heavy language of separation, language of isolation, and frankly, supremacy, authoritarianism.
yeah,
Uh, and I get frustrated when I start to suggest leftist ideas and people like call me radical. I'm like, basic needs are radical. Like fuck off. What is that? But there is something, and I think what I'm trying to do is circle back around to how you're saying there has to be some kind of jolt. There has to be some kind of charge or explosion, something demonstrative uh, that hooks us emotionally uh, uh, and gets us to rally behind it. But the interesting thing is every time someone's tamping down, oh, that's radical what you're saying, Sean, or something other than a two-party system or something that's more parliamentarian or whatever it is, I'm like, dude, the GOP, the right has been radical for 2 decades now. I mean, whether it's obstructionism under Obama or whether it was what you were talking about earlier, Southern strategy, coming out of the 40s and 50s, but
sure.
concretizing in the 60s as a reaction to the progressive push of the 60s. So for me, I get frustrated with moderates. I get frustrated with know nothings, do nothings, and then that makes me want to go even more radical. Be like, you're right. Let's fucking flip the tables, like Jesus in the temple, start over again. But how do you harness that in a not a populist way, but in a popular way, where it is left and altruistic and society building, as opposed to right and authoritarian and society fragmenting.
Let's think of the country as an organism or as a client. Let's think of the country as a client.
Oh shit!
All right.
It's sick. It's pathology. There's sociopathy. There's
No, I mean, the 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 one way that I have seen success in people in crisis and people who have issues in which they want to start doing the work is they is when the tide begins to turn, is when they have purpose. Is if there is a goal to save my family, I need to stop drinking. Or
this is
they
hitting
just
bottom.
they just discovered that I have fatty liver disease, and if I don't get my shit together in 6 months, I'm dead. Or I just want to be a better person. I just don't want to be 30 pounds overweight and have a resting heart rate of 130. When you have purpose, discipline is not needed. Discipline is organic. Then you're like, okay, shit, here we go. I got to get up. I got to do this. I got to do this. We have no purpose as a country right now. Our only purpose is survival. After COVID,
Mm.
after this, it's everybody is in it for themselves, just out of sheer survival and comfort. And you know what? If I can just have one day where I don't have to think about this, I'll be okay. That's the mindset. Instead of saying, like, oh my God, there's alien ships over every major city in the US. We need to pull together. There's nothing galvanizing. There's no purpose. Like I said, there's no space race. There is no, you know, you pick your major galvanizing event. And every time something collapses, it's because it immediately fractures and then those constituent parts start to fall away. The lack of cohesion. I was in the biggest empire of the world. It was fascinating for me. I'm now a student of the Austrian-Hungary Empire. You know, I was in the home of the Habsburgs, the biggest modern empire in history for the most part, functioning. And that thing fragmented and just fell apart and was there and was no longer there almost overnight.
Mm-hmm.
It was beginning to rot up until Gavrilo Princip, killed Archduke Ferdinand in Sarajevo, but it was already going there. But if you see all the pieces that made up that Eastern European and Western European empire, and then how it just fell apart, it was not overnight. And I mean, you can kind of see that it's, history is echoing right now. And then there was this explosion of prolific art. Unbelievable art came out of that period. Unbelievable thought, unbelievable science and humanities blended, but people knew something was coming. And, it was phenomenal for me to be in a city where there's a coffee house where Trotsky, Stalin, and Hitler hung out while Freud was up the street and Gustav Klimt was painting the Kiss. It was like, what the hell? So it's happened before where there's been this explosion of humanity amidst failing institutions. So going back to that thing of like a client, we have no purpose. That's the end of my thesis. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'll shut up now.
No,
Jesus, you got me fired up. It's fucking Friday, and I'm ready to fill my water bottle up with propane and throw it.
No, I appreciate it. It's why I invited you. It's why I wanted people to hear your articulateness. And I mean, we have maybe about 10 minutes, if that, left. And yet I don't know how to wrap it up.
It's called a mercy killing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. No, but so, I mean, we are incredibly ahistorical. And I think that is to our detriment. I think it's very easy to not put the pieces together, which is why part of the political spectrum and the socio-political spectrum here doesn't want history and wants to put 10 Commandments out in front of the halls of law, and we don't want to learn about what we've done to certain groups of people over decades, much less still to this day. So, what is the spark? Again, you mentioned community, one-on-one interactions, right? Neighborhood get-togethers, but we still are stuck in a system that is woefully, blinkered, is dragging itself, into the middle 21st century, kicking and screaming, where even the left is moderate or right, and no one seems to have, again, that radicalism,
Nobody does.
That healthy radicalism to be like, fuck, this just doesn't work. My opinion has been, look, folks, because I have folks who are left of me, which is shocking. There aren't many, but there are people out there who are left of me, and what I call them, though, are the useless commies, because I'm like, you want to do the commune thing and all that, and that speaks to Paul's community, organizing, but really you're just removing yourself. I mean, you if you're not voting, if you're not participating, not only can you not bitch, but then you also can't yell at me for being some kind of cog in the wheel. I still think that there needs to be like just one last, vote.
Here's the thing. It will all stop when this country once again becomes the American experiment. Right now, the government and the country is a brand. And I'm speaking as a marketing guy. It is not a country. It is a brand. And all the stuff that you're talking about is that, like, Tuskegee didn't happen. Tulsa didn't happen. The Native Americans, didn't, and the genocide didn't happen.
Ignore, deny.
I mean, I was in Philadelphia, and it was, on this trip, I came back, that was my city back in, and I went to the Liberty Bell, and I went to Independence Hall, and I'm like, holy shit, this whole city is just a brand. It is the equivalent of the Magic Kingdom, because there's nothing in here that talks about, there was nothing around the Liberty Bell, there was nothing around Independence Hall that talked about the slaves, that talked about what was built here by whom and things like that. And it really struck me. It was like, oh my God, this country is a brand. It is not a country. And so, and we're left to vote this year to save ourselves. And somebody asked me, they're like, well, you're obviously voting for Joe Biden. I go, and I go, yes, but I'm not voting for Joe Biden. I'm voting for the judiciary and NATO. That's what I'm voting for, to keep those safe. Everything else, we can sort it out in the wash, but save those two things. That's my voting. That's what's written on my little piece of paper when I go to the booth.
Right. The few institutions that might still help pull us out with
Not
the push of the
pull us
people,
out, just
with the
help
will
us
of the people.
survive. Help us survive.
Right.
I mean, three Supreme Court decisions came down today that were one
outrageous.
That gutted regulation. I mean, is going to hurt the environment, and then the other one about homeless people sleeping.
Right. It's okay to incarcerate. Is that what it was?
Yes. And I had a person go, well, good, who lives in LA, who has to deal with the encampments, down the street from them. They're like, well, good. I'm like, do you realize that now certain parts of our government and society and enforcement communities can now say, you were sleeping. No, I wasn't. Get in the car. You were sleeping. No, I wasn't. You were sleeping. And it's okay.
Same as what Texas is doing. Right. Yeah. Same as what Texas is doing. I mean, they legalize racial profiling all over again. Yeah. And both of those, again, have their roots in Black codes, Jim Crow. You're loitering, get in the truck, exactly like you're saying.
So we've done it again. Old script.
Right. I don't even know how to fucking end other than yes, vote. And I know which way I'm going to vote as well. And it's the same goddamn way, only because my splitting the difference is, do I want a sense of democracy that's limping along, and maybe that spark that you're speaking of will come, maybe we'll congeal as a society, maybe we'll have another peaceful revolution, we'll continue the Poor People's Campaign like Barbara's doing right now and like King did, decades ago, and hold on to some of the vestiges, the last sort of vapors of goodness and remedy, or nothing at all. Because again, like you said, Project 2025 and what the right is pushing, it's authoritarianism. And that's no democracy, as opposed to one that is incredibly troubled, but reparable.
You are voting for the institutions that protect the better angels. Lincoln's quote, this is the better angels that we're fighting for now. And so if there is a organization or an institution or a governmental apparatus that is being held in place by the current party or the party that you would like to see protect that, vote for that. Me, it's NATO. To keep that together, I mean, that is just a string that we do not want to unravel right now. And then the judiciary is in crisis. So those are the two things that mean the most to me, because I have a daughter who cried when Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed, because that 14-year-old girl knew what that meant. So, I mean, that fires me up. So if I can keep these certain things that I know will affect my life on a macro level and eventually at a micro level 10 years from now, that's what I'm voting for. I'm not voting for a man who is past his prime. I'm voting for Jake Sullivan. I'm voting for an administration that is in place, that is doing very good work. You don't go to Disneyland just to see Mickey Mouse. You go for the overall experience. That's how we should be looking at this election, is the overall experience that you want to have. And you've got a favorite ride. Okay, you're going for that favorite ride. My favorite ride happens to be, a fair judiciary and somewhat stable geopolitical environment.
I like how you're talking about the judiciary, and that's a great note to end on. And I just want to say that if that happens, as far as the attention paid the judiciary, can we just flood SCOTUS? Can we just appoint, like run it up to to, add 4 more people? Like what are the means and levers that you have to pull to just do that? I mean, especially if you're a lame duck president and people get pissed off, you can go ahead and just appoint at will.
There you go.
That's pretty fucking radical, but I mean, I love it.
Yeah, I mean, sure, stack it, do whatever, but yes, I mean, I am not fearful, but I'm also looking at this from a historical context. Is change on the scale that is needed right now is probably not going to come wrapped in linen and smelling of lavender. It's going to be a bumpy ride. I mean, there are things outside of this country that don't even get me started on the fact that, of environmental degradation, of, certain other things that are going to be causing stressors on the United States. And so, yeah, it is a big thing. And so going back in a note of hope, because I'm not going to be that guy that somebody had turned off 25 minutes ago. Jesus, this guy's a crackpot. He's going off. It's that local. It is that, fix our own house and see if the other house needs help. What you're good at, focus on what you're good at, find a purpose, and can that contribute? Are you, can you help that elderly neighbor who can't get that old garden hose off of their spigot? Can you do that for them? Can you make somebody smile? That has a contagion about it, because otherwise, it all looks pretty fruitless.
Thank you, Paul Chamberlain. Davey Lobos. I appreciate it. Reached out to Paul Chamberlain, ladies and gentlemen, and was like, oh my God, did you see the debate? And now we've gotten a little more sucker, a little more information, a little more clarity. I appreciate it. And I will keep calling on you, and hopefully you'll keep saying yes, so we can hash these things out and keep having these dialogues.
It is always a joy and something I look forward to when you and I get ripping on conversation.
Take care. Thank you very much, Paul Chamberlain.